and my family betrayed me at my wedding. They promised to pay everything but sent me a $34K invoice 2 days later. Then I discovered it was a generational manipulation tactic and left them speechless. I'm 28 years old. I work as a software engineer, and I haven't spoken to my parents in almost 3 months after they basically tried to ruin what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And when I say ruin, I'm not exaggerating, because 2 days after my wedding, they sent me an invoice for $34,000. Yes, you read that right. An invoice. Itemized. With suggested interest if I paid late. But I guess I should start from the beginning because this story really starts way before the wedding, probably since I can remember. I grew up being the second daughter, the youngest, and my sister Melissa was always the favorite. It's not that I'm bitter or anything. I mean, yes I am, but I've learned to live with it. You know? Melissa is 4 years older than me, and since we were kids, things were always different for her. When she wanted ballet classes, she got them. When I asked for the same thing, my parents said there was no budget. Melissa went to a super expensive private university, all paid for by them, while I had to get scholarships and work part-time to pay for mine, because suddenly money was an issue. And the worst part is that nobody in the family seemed to notice, or if they noticed, they just ignored it, like it was normal for one daughter to receive everything and the other to have to figure things out on her own. I became independent really fast. Like at 16, I was already looking for summer jobs and saving every penny I could because I knew I couldn't count on them for anything. And looking back now, I think that was the best thing that could have happened to me because it made me strong and self-sufficient. But at the time, it hurt like hell. It hurt to see how Melissa got a new car for her 17th birthday, while I had to buy my own used car with money I'd saved from working at a restaurant for 2 years. It hurt to hear my parents brag about Melissa's achievements at family gatherings, while my perfect grades and full scholarship barely got a mention. But well, that's how things were and I learned to accept it. Things really escalated like 5 years ago when Melissa got married. Don't get me wrong, I was happy for her. I really was. But what happened at her wedding was just ridiculous. My parents gave her $400,000 as a wedding gift. $400,000. They said it during the toast like it was nothing. Basically announced in front of all the guests that they were giving her that amount so she and her husband could buy their dream house. I remember sitting there with my boyfriend at the time. Well, now he's my husband, James. And we both looked at each other like, what the hell just happened? I had been sharing an apartment with 2 roommates to be able to pay rent, and these 2 had just given away almost $500,000 like it was pocket change. After that, I distanced myself from them a bit. Not dramatically or anything. I just stopped visiting as often and reduced contact to occasional calls and mandatory family gatherings. James and I moved in together the following year and started building our own life without depending on anyone. He's a graphic designer and works from home, and honestly, we were doing pretty well financially. Nothing fancy but comfortable, you know what I mean? We could pay rent without problems, go out to dinner sometimes, save a little each month. It was a good life. A year and a half ago, James proposed to me on a weekend. We went to the beach. It was super simple and perfect. Just the 2 of us and the sunset. You know, exactly how I wanted it. When I told my parents, I expected a lukewarm reaction, like a, "That's nice, honey, congratulations," and that's it. But surprisingly, they seemed super excited. My mom even cried on the phone and said she couldn't wait to help me plan everything. I was like confused but also a little hopeful, you know? Like, maybe finally I was going to have my moment. Maybe finally they were going to treat me like they treated Melissa. We started planning the wedding with a budget of $36,000 that James and I had saved over 2 years. We wanted something nice but modest, like 100 guests, at a nice venue but not ostentatious, pretty flowers but nothing over the top. My mom came with me to appointments with vendors and seemed genuinely involved, gave her opinion on colors and flower arrangements, even helped me choose my dress. My dad called every week to ask how the plans were going. It was weird, but nice. I thought maybe they had reflected on how they'd treated me all these years and were trying to make up for it. Like 2 months before the wedding, we were at a family lunch, like a typical Sunday at my parents' house with Melissa and her husband there too, and my dad suddenly says, "Lauren, your mother and I have been talking and we want to pay for your entire wedding." I was shocked, literally frozen with my fork halfway to my mouth, unable to move. James squeezed my hand under the table and I could only say, "Really?" And my mom says, all smiling, "Yes, honey. It's the least we can do. We want you to have the perfect day without worrying about money. Melissa was there nodding like it was the most normal thing in the world, like finally my parents were doing the right thing. I was super suspicious, honestly, because after 28 years of being second choice, this didn't make sense. But James told me that maybe they really were changing, that people can reflect and improve. We accepted their offer, but I made it clear that we already had everything contracted, and the budget was $36,000, that we weren't going to do anything extravagant. My dad said no problem, that he just wanted me to be happy. And the next 2 months, they paid directly to all the vendors. I'd pass them the invoices and they'd cover them. It was strangely easy. And for the first time in my life, I felt like they were treating me like Melissa. The wedding day was absolutely perfect. The weather was amazing. The venue, I looked beautiful. My friends helped me get ready. And when I saw myself in the mirror in my dress, I felt like a princess. James cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. And honestly, it was the happiest moment of my life up to that point. My parents were in the front row looking proud. My mom was crying and my dad winked at me when I passed by him. The reception was amazing. We danced all night. The DJ was great, the food delicious. And when James and I left around midnight in the car full of cans and with a just married sign, I thought that finally, I'd had my moment of being the important daughter. We went on our honeymoon to Cancun for a week. Nothing super fancy but nice. A week of beach and piña coladas and just enjoying being newlyweds. We got back on a Sunday night, super relaxed and happy, with that post-beach tan and still in our newlywed bliss bubble. Tuesday morning, I was checking the mail while having coffee before starting to work from home. You know, all those congratulations cards and maybe some gift checks from distant relatives, and I find a large envelope from my parents. I open it thinking maybe it's a nice letter or wedding photos or something like that. It was an invoice. A detailed invoice down to the last penny of everything they had paid for the wedding. Venue, $12,500. Catering, $8,200. Flowers, $2,100. DJ, $1,800. Photography, $4,500. And it went on page after page, every damn expense detailed with scanned receipts attached, even the tip they'd given the valet. The total was $34,445.89, and at the end it said, full payment required within 30 days. After that date, a 5% monthly interest will apply. Like it was an invoice from a utility company or something. I sat there staring at that paper, unable to process it. James was in his office, working, and I just couldn't move. I read the invoice like 5 times, thinking maybe I was misinterpreting something, that maybe it was a bad joke, or there was an explanatory letter that had fallen out of the envelope. But no, it was real. My parents had invoiced me for my own wedding 2 days after I got married. I started shaking. Literally felt like I was going to pass out. And the only thing I could think was why? Why would they do this? Why not just tell me from the beginning that it was a loan or that they expected me to pay them back? Why make me believe that finally they were treating me like Melissa? When James came out of his office and saw me, he asked what was wrong because apparently I was pale as a ghost. I showed him the invoice and he was shocked too. We sat together on the couch trying to understand what the hell was happening. And he wanted to call them immediately and demand an explanation, but I knew that wouldn't help. I knew my parents and I knew they had some twisted explanation prepared or would just say I was overreacting. I spent the next 2 days in a kind of mental fog. I couldn't concentrate on work, barely ate, just went over and over everything in my head. When had they planned this? Was it always their intention to invoice me? Or did they decide to do it after? Did they do the same thing to Melissa and she just paid without saying anything? Though I knew the answer to that last question was no, because they gave her $400,000 as a gift, not an invoice. I called Melissa to ask if she knew anything and she said she had no idea, that what they'd done seemed horrible, but maybe I was misinterpreting their intentions. Misinterpreting, like there was any way to misinterpret an invoice with a due date and interest. Thursday of that week, I sat down and wrote a check for the full amount. James tried to convince me not to do it, to confront them first, but I knew what I had to do. I included a letter with the check that basically said, "Here is full payment for your services as parents of the bride. Consider this final payment of any debt I've had to you during my 28 years of life. I don't expect to hear from me again." I sent it, certified mail to make sure they received it and then blocked them both from my phone and social media. James did the same. For like 2 weeks, nothing happened. And I started to think that maybe they'd understood and were going to leave me alone. But then messages from family members started. My aunt on my mom's side called me saying I was ungrateful, that after everything my parents had done for me, this is how I repaid them. My cousin sent me a long message saying I was destroying the family over something silly. Even my dad's grandmother, who's like 90 years old, left me a voicemail saying she was disappointed in me. It was like my parents had launched a smear campaign against me with all the extended family. What really blew my mind was the email I received from my mom like a week later. I didn't even know she had my personal email. We normally communicated by phone or text. The email said that the invoice had been a life lesson to teach me the value of money and the importance of family, that they had always planned to give me $100,000 as a wedding gift once I matured and understood the gesture. But since I had reacted so badly and been so disrespectful, now they weren't going to give me anything. That I should be grateful. They'd given me the opportunity to pay them, instead of ruining my credit by suing me. I read that email like 10 times, unable to believe it. A life lesson. They had humiliated and betrayed me on what was supposed to be one of the most important moments of my life as a damn life lesson. And now they wanted to make me believe they'd always planned to give me money, but I'd ruined everything with my reaction. It was pure manipulation, textbook gaslighting, and the worst part is some family members probably believed them. That same afternoon, I went to the bank with my phone and used the app to do mobile deposit of the check I'd sent them. Basically, I canceled it before they could cash it. I didn't care. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. James said technically that could get me in legal trouble, but honestly, I didn't care at that moment. I was so angry, so hurt, so tired of everything that I just wanted them to be screwed. The next day, Melissa showed up at my apartment. She didn't call first or anything, just showed up ringing the doorbell like crazy. I was inside and could hear her screaming through the door that she had to talk to me, that what I was doing was wrong, that I was breaking our parents' hearts. I yelled back through the door for her to leave or I'd call the police. She stayed there for like half an hour more yelling things until eventually she left. I never opened the door. That same night, I got a call from a number I didn't have blocked. It was my uncle, my dad's brother, with whom I practically had no relationship because he lived in another state. I thought it was going to be another person calling to tell me how terrible I was, but instead he said, "Lauren, I need to tell you something." Turns out like 20 years ago, when my uncle got married, my grandparents, my dad's parents, did exactly the same thing to him. They promised to pay for his wedding. They did. And then sent him an invoice. When he refused to pay, they told him they were going to disinherit him and basically cut contact with him for years until he finally paid to keep family peace. He told me that when he found out what had happened to me, he immediately knew my dad had learned that manipulation tactic from his own parents and that I probably wasn't the first or the last to experience it. That conversation changed everything for me. It wasn't just that my parents were bad people to me specifically. It was that they had learned this toxic behavior from previous generations, and now they were perpetuating it. It was a pattern. A twisted way of maintaining control over their children, using money as a weapon. My uncle told me he'd spent the last 20 years in therapy, trying to undo the psychological damage that experience had caused him and recommended I do the same, that I cut contact completely because people like that don't change. Like 2 weeks after all this, my dad left me a voicemail. He'd managed to call from a different number I didn't have blocked. His voice sounded tired, almost vulnerable, and he just said, "Lauren, please, I need to talk to you. Just give me a chance to explain. I love you," and hung up. That message broke me a little because part of me, that small childish part that still wants parental approval, wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that maybe he'd realized the damage he'd caused and wanted to fix it. I showed James the message and he told me the decision was mine, but to be very careful. I spent like 3 days thinking about it and finally decided to meet my dad at a public cafe on neutral territory. I sent him a message from email saying where and when, and that I'd come alone, but James would be waiting for me in the car outside in case anything went wrong. The meeting was strange. My dad arrived with a manila envelope that he put on the table between us. He told me he'd talked to my mom and they'd decided they wanted to give me back the money I'd paid, that they'd realized they'd made a mistake. I opened the envelope and there was a check for $34,445.89. I stared at it without touching it. I asked him why they'd done all this, and he started with the same story that it was to teach me a lesson, that they wanted me to value things, blah blah blah. I told him that was garbage. That Melissa had received $400,000 without any life lesson, that this had nothing to do with teachings and everything to do with control and favoritism. He got defensive, saying each daughter was different, that Melissa needed more help because she had a big mortgage, and I had a good job. I told him that when Melissa received that money, she also had a good job. That excuse didn't make sense. Then he changed tactics and said, well, maybe. They'd been unfair to me over the years, but now they were trying to fix it by returning the money. I asked him about the supposed $100,000 they said they were going to give me as a gift. He went quiet. Obviously, that part had been a lie. I pushed the envelope back across the table and told him I didn't want his money. That what I wanted was to be treated like a human being, like their daughter, not like a second option who only mattered when it was convenient for them. That I'd spent 28 years feeling invisible in my own family, and I was tired. That he could keep his money and his guilt, and not to expect to hear from me again unless they were willing to go to family therapy and really work on their toxic behavior. He sat there, not knowing what to say, and I just got up and left. It's been almost 3 months since then. I haven't spoken to my parents or Melissa. Some family members keep sending me occasional messages saying I'm exaggerating, that family is family, and I should forgive. Others, surprisingly, have supported me privately, saying they always noticed the favoritism but didn't know what to say. My uncle messages me every couple of weeks just to see how I am, which is nice considering we were basically strangers before this. James and I are doing well, honestly. Our relationship has strengthened a lot through all this. I started going to therapy like a month and a half ago, and it's helping a ton to process everything, not just the wedding stuff, but years and years of feeling less than my sister. My therapist says establishing firm boundaries is healthy, and I don't have to feel guilty about prioritizing my mental well-being over my family's expectations. I don't know what's going to happen long-term. Part of me misses the idea of having normal parents, of having that relationship other people have with their families, but I'm starting to accept that was never my reality, and probably never will be. And that's okay. I have James, I have my friends, I have a life I built on my own without anyone's help, and that's something I can be proud of. Last week, it was Sunday morning and I was making waffles for breakfast while James was making coffee. My phone rang with an unknown number, and for a second I tensed up thinking, maybe it was someone from my family again, but it was just a spam call. James noticed my reaction and hugged me from behind while I was standing by the stove and said, "You're okay. We're okay. We don't need anything more than this." And he was right. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely at peace with everything, like I was finally exactly where I was supposed to be, surrounded by people who really love me without conditions or hidden invoices. And that, I guess, is enough for now.